start, mate, and then
Yeah,
we can come back to it.
Cool.
Hi guys, welcome to the Lunge and Lift podcast. Today we are joined with a very special guest, Mr. BJ Rule. Welcome,
Morning.
mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Who are you, mate? What do you do? You're obviously very important because you're here, but for those who haven't come across you yet, please give us a bit of background.
I'm just a dude doing his thing in London town. What would I say? I currently, obviously in lockdown 3, doing bits and pieces is what I'm doing at the moment. And what are bits and pieces? I'm doing some programming for some individual people. I do some Skype sessions for other people, for existing clients. So personal training, some coaching. There's some rehab kind of things that I'm doing at the moment. And they're from my clients that I've had for some of them for almost 20 years in London. So there's different bits and pieces, but it's actually currently I'm not doing that much. That'd be maybe 15 hours worth of face-to-face kind of work, maybe less depending on the week. Whereas normally that would have been, 20 plus hours of PT plus, probably 12 hours of coaching, CrossFit coaching. So it's kind of, the workload's a lot less, but enjoying spending it with the family. So it's quite a nice time. So that's where I'm at right now. So that's what I'm doing now.
Rather than focusing on this specific moment in time, I think you're being far too modest and underplaying your experience in the fitness industry. I think I first met you at Gymbox Farringdon, where you were running CrossFit City Road with one of our former guests, Mr. Tom McAdam, and one of the OGs of the London CrossFit scene, I think it's fair to say. So maybe let's start with the fact that you're an immigrant. And tell us the story. Why did you come to England in the first place? How did you get into fitness, and build from there?
Okay, so getting into fitness, always, probably standard story. Played sport kind of my whole life, mainly rugby league in Australia. Went and did an exercise science degree at the University of Wollongong, because I wanted a career kind of I didn't know what it was at the time. Personal training didn't kind of exist the way it does now as a career path. But I had some mentors in a kind of the older sense of the word, people that you kind of looked up to and respected, other coaches who had done human movement or sports science degrees, and I thought, that looks all right. And actually, prior to that, 1995 was when I first kind of qualified into the fitness industry. I was 19, living in Queensland. So I'm from Sydney, Australia, but I was living in Queensland playing rugby league, and thought, I could be doing some work while I'm here, type of thing. And did, at the time, it was I think it was called fitness leader course, through Gold Coast Personal Trainers or something like that. And it was effectively would have been equivalent to the 3-month Premier diploma. Like, it took me about 3 months. I think it was a couple of evenings a week plus some practical work on a weekend or something like that. So I did that, and then started working in gyms kind of the next couple of years after that. And then at that time also went to university. So I was working at the sport and recreation gym at uni while I was there. So that was great, because it was kind of like, you're working in it, plus you're doing exercise science. So that was quite cool. And then basically when I finished uni in 2000, I was going to go overseas, come over to Europe for the plan was 6 months. And what are we now? The 29th. On the 9th of February, I'll have been here for 20 years.
Wow.
So, and have married and have 2 kids, and, right on that kind of midpoint of almost middle age. So, I never would have thought that, I remember having conversations with my mum and younger brothers that, I'll be home soon, through that first time that I was here, they'll be home. I'm in Turkey, wherever I was at the time. And I'm like, when I go back to London, I'll be heading back. And that was probably 6 months in. And then got back to London, and I kind of felt a little bit at home at London, like in London. It reminded me of kind of where I grew up in, kind of the inner suburbs of Sydney. So it was kind of it felt familiar. So I was like, oh, this will do for a while. I'll see out my kind of, work holiday visa, etc. But then was just, able to stay and stayed, and was working in, at the time was working in some pubs, walkabout pubs, but I was also working for a sports, they were called, I think they were called the Sports Web. They were like a basically like a recruitment agency for trainers, for coaches, for physios. That's Sports Web, I think they're called. And then just did some kind of different things with them. They did there was kind of there was working in gyms. There was some PT work. There was also kind of like occupational therapy type of things in different places. They'd basically send you, they'd need a slot to fill somewhere, and you'd go somewhere in London, and you work for a day or a week or whatever. And I did that for kind of 6 months, and then started building up a client base. Worked in a couple of small PT studios. There was one I worked at in Islington, in Angel, and then 2006, end of 2006, Joss and myself, who Joss now my wife, but at the time, we started kind of dating about 2004. But we met at personal training studio. We then we opened our own studio in the city back in end of 2006. One personal training, and so that was quite early. The only other kind of operators like that, I think, in the town, like in the city itself, you had like some Fitness Firsts. Gym Box at Bank hadn't even opened yet. There weren't many personal training studios. There was Matt Roberts Personal Training, which is still there, but that was kind of that was about it, really. So yeah, we did that for 5 years, and then I ended up at Gym Box, and then that's when kind of met Tom at Gym Box a couple of years after I was first there, and then we put in a proposal to Gym Box to effectively run a gym within the gym. That was what our proposal was, and that's kind of how CrossFit City Road came about in 2014 at Gym Box at Old Street. So that's kind of that's the last 15 years in a kind of a couple of long paragraphs, but that's kind of it. And I've been obviously working in the industry since I was kind of 20, so almost it's 25, 26 years now, isn't it? Wow, that feels weird. So that's where we're at now. Obviously, you guys both know, but we're in the process of opening our own site. Obviously, everything's a little bit nothing's necessarily on hold. Everything's just a little bit slow because of the current, global pandemic, just with getting things approved and whatnot. But we're in the process of opening our own premises, which will be basis, and quite excited about that. And that's one thing that I'd like for this all to be over and to be able to get on with that would be nice.
For sure.
I think on that, it's just funny because you're saying about that. You sound like, obviously, over the last, say, 25 years, you've been pretty much like, say, go through all the different sort of things. I guess you're about to embark on like another massive venture. So in a way, this is probably a nice bit of downtime that, even though you want to get started, I guess to recharge a little bit, to give you all that enthusiasm to like give basically everything that you can.
Absolutely, it is quite nice, and it's good to have a bit of in some ways, obviously there's a global pandemic, and it's horrible for a lot of people, and both with people being ill, people dying, obviously people and their kind of financial situations, employment, etc. But it has been quite nice for me in that it's time to reflect. Otherwise I would have gone straight from having managing my PET clients, working on City Road, and it would have pretty much just gone straight into this. So it would have not been there wouldn't have been that downtime or time to reflect. What it's also been useful for the business is actually trying to know exactly how we want it to run and how we want it to go, as opposed to it would have potentially just been a continuation, even though we didn't want it to be, but it would have been hard without a break for it not to have just one thing flown into into the other. So yeah, it's been nice, but I do like doing things. So I do also have quite itchy feet at the moment, like where it's kind of like, I'd like this to get on, because I've in that time I've done plenty of other things. I've worked, I've done some S&C for rugby league teams in the UK. I've always tried. I like projects as well as kind of doing my main body of work. So it's an interesting time. But I'm also very, very appreciative. We chatted a little bit about it beforehand. That mentioned that this time with my kids, a nearly 2-year-old and a nearly 6-year-old. I'm never going to have this time again. With them, where I'm with them, every day. And it's fantastic. It's a brilliant time. I think I mentioned the next time that this could happen would be, I'll be potentially retired in my 60s, or whenever that happens. They're going to be in their 20s. The 20-year-old kids aren't going to want to hang around with their 60-year-old dad, not in the same way, and vice versa as well. Life will just be different. So it's a very, very unique time. So it's there's things I am appreciative of. Absolutely.
So just want to come back to your experience, because there aren't many people who've been in the fitness industry for as long as you, and I'm really interested to get your take on what you've seen change over the years, because I think the fitness industry in the early 2000s compared to what it is now is so different. What are the key things? What have you seen change since then? Because I think
look, there's massive changes. If you think about it, it's even it's kind of 95, so it's the mid 90s, and even being at uni at that time, but also a lot of people who did exercise science when I was at uni went on to kind of didn't necessarily work as trainers. A lot of their stuff may have been may have worked for insurance companies and case managers and different things for for kind of work covering and occupational therapy. So a lot of people who did my degree did those kind of jobs afterwards. I was already I was working in gyms, so I had a kind of, in some ways, not incredibly unique, because there were a few other people doing the same kind of thing. But I was in the fitness industry as well as working in the kind of science side of it as well. Mate, it's changed massively, but like a lot of things, it's changed, but it's also a lot hasn't changed, if that makes sense. Like, fitness itself hasn't changed. It's how it's marketed, packaged, and or sold that has changed, if that makes sense. In the late 90s, if you kind of do it almost on a timeline, everyone was about sports specificity. So there's all this kind of people were talking about loading up clubs and kind of mimicking movements that played in your sports, and there was all the arguments whether that was good or bad, and so that was the kind of the kind of general discussions and debates, and kind of where everyone was at. What do you think about sports specificity? What don't you think? What do you like? Is it this? Is it that? Etc. Then there was kind of the early 2000s when you first started learning about functional training, but it almost had a different meaning to what it has now. So functional training at the time would have been, as opposed to say CrossFit's definition of functional, of just performing tasks and core to extremity, etc. It was the misconception was that everyone was messing about on BOSU balls and balance balls, and it was that idea that it was trying to get people away from, well, not necessarily getting people away from it. It was rather than a traditional kind of bodybuilding or NSCA kind of strength and conditioning. This is what you wanted to get people to do more of, and that was maybe even just looking at bilateral stuff, and there's a lot of band and a lot of pulley kind of work, and that was the idea of functional training. Big guys in the field was Paul Check initially. Paul Check, kind of Gary Gray. I remember doing a lot of their kind of stuff in the early 2000s. And the other end, you had Ian King, an Australian strength coach, and Charles Poliquin, and they were funnily enough, T Nation or testosterone.net. you know, I remember that when I was at uni, and the first authors for that were, you know, Polican, Czech, Ian King, and it was cool. And they all had, you know, slightly different ways and methodologies. But so that was then bodybuilding kind of came back a little bit via kind of, you know, Polican kind of influencing in the late kind of 2000s. It was all and that kind of into macros, and then everyone started coming back to, you know, even if you go back 10 years ago, and even when I was first at Gymbox, like a lot of the trainers now who are functional coaches, they, you know, 10 years ago were bodybuilders or fitness models. A lot of them were kind of, you know, moved that way. So it's, you know, it's changed. It's changed a lot in terms of what the general perception of what fitness is, or at least what's marketed and what's put out there and what's kind of pushed and what the cool things are. But as you know, as we all know, fitness itself hasn't necessarily changed. You know, you're doing work. You know, you're picking things up. You kind of, you know, you're working your cardiovascular system. Like, you know, everyone's into their nasal breathing right now. And which is fantastic. Getting back to those, you know, that zone 2, which I don't think exists, but, you know, trying to the myth of zone 2, man. I can't find it. Wait till you get older and your max heart rate comes down, and then it's like, what is 120, mate? Like 120 beats.
It's one beat, like one beat over in zone 3, one beat below zone 1.
Mate, there's no way. I just try to stay in zone 3, and I've still got to stay under 140 for that. And I'm kind of like, come on, man. Like, I'm walking backwards. Anyway, but, you know, that used to be like before. That used to be that you'd you know, instead of nasal breathing, it was, you know, the famous talk test. You know, so I remember kind of rugby training kind of back in the early 90s and stuff. And you'd have to do parts where you'd have to have full conversations. You'd have to be talking. You'd have to be communicating, and that was the way you kept it kind of, you know, at different levels. And so things have been around. They've just we've maybe learned a little bit more about the science as to why. So they get applied in different ways. Same with food. You know, everyone's kind of mad keen on counting calories. You know, that's the ability to have, you know, MyFitnessPal, and to actually know even closer to what you're doing in terms of eating calories has only just become available in the last 7-8 years. You know, like, and maybe less. I'm not too sure. But, you know, I remember working with different bodybuilding gyms that I was working in, kind of, you know, late 90s, and people would kind of do almost what Stan Efferding brought back to the table a couple of years ago with the idea of the velocity diet. These people would be eating chicken and rice and whatever else, and then they'd kind of either increase the amount of what they were eating, or they'd reduce it, and they'd kind of see how they were going and what was happening, and then that's how they, you know, kind of know a bit more about what macros they were getting in, as opposed to kind of weighing and measuring everything. So, you know, things have changed, but they're still doing the same thing. You're either kind of increasing your calories or reducing your calories, but the way that we measure them or the way that we know about them is a little bit different.
What would you say are the major evolutions in your own personal training? Like, did you go through that same fluctuation from starting bodybuilding, moving more into S&C, then CrossFit?
Yeah, I think things have changed, but again, also they've stayed the same. So my played a lot of sport as a kid. I played a decent level of rugby league in that, you know, kind of peaked when I was 15. Played for my state, played for New South Wales schools, Catholic schools, when I was 15, and so had decent level of coaching. If you know, at the time, when was that, 1991, right? And then did like a under 15s, under 17s, under 19s kind of academy. The ages and stuff, I think, are different now. I think it's 16s, 18s, 20s, or whatever it is. But so you kind of, you know, you had different coaches. You had lots of different coaches. You had, and that's probably what inspired me also to kind of get into what I'm doing, because I really enjoyed what they did. I remember being handed, you know, when I was 14, so it would have been 1990. You get handed like a manual, like, you know, printouts, photocopies of kind of effectively your training, what you're meant to be doing, your homework, etc., what you're meant to be eating, and different things like that. And and I remember in September, and yeah, so it's obviously Australia, so that's going into our summer, so that's off season, right? So September season would start kind of March next year. I remember being handed kind of these things, and you're going, oh, these guys know what stretches we're going to be doing in February. You know, they know this is amazing. You know, so it's all there, it's all mapped out. You know, sets, reps, your sprints, whatever. And I thought that was really, really cool. And so to take it from I've completely lost where I'm going with that. I was building up something big. So training history. So it was strength and conditioning right from the start, and it was periodization, and that's what we're looking at, right? And then I kind of got into, probably when I was at uni, that probably continued a little bit, and then when I came over here, obviously everything until then was heavily influenced by that, and then I did some Paul Chek stuff in early kind of, must have been when I was first, so 2001, must have been 2002, and Scientific Core and Scientific Back, and I think they then became his level 1 or level 2s. I'm not too sure, but that's what they're called then, and that was really cool because that was almost from a functional anatomy kind of perspective, in that you looked at kind of you looked at different postural positions and how different things affected how the body moved, and you looked at the whole kinetic chain, etc. And I found that really, really interesting. I thought that was really, really cool because a lot of the parts you learned at uni, whether it was through knocking over my clothes hanger, whether it was systemic anatomy or whatever you were learning, but this was actually that was then the Paul Chek stuff was actually putting that into practice, really, and you're able to understand what you'd learnt in the kind of cadaver lab. You're able to put that, see how it worked on a living person next to you and moving in front of you, and you'd kind of watch them lunge and watch them do whatever else. So that was really cool. So that was probably the first kind of thing that changed with my learning, because before that I was kind of like, hey, I've had some pretty good coaches. I kind of I know how to get people stronger. I know how to get people fitter or faster. So I'm down with that. That's what else do you need to know? So that was probably the first shift when kind of in those early 2000s that I did particularly Paul Chek stuff, because it was a different perspective. Even some of the Poliquin stuff, and it ended up becoming PICP. But again, back in 2000, I think maybe 5 or whenever it was, I did some of his things, and you'd order the courses, and it was called level 1, level 2, which effectively did become the PICP, I think. And they were, you got the paperwork, and then you'd go and do the practical at MuscleWorks. And I never ended up doing the practical. I got the information, and then never made the dates, or whatever. And that was all that information. So that was cool. But that was probably still more similar. That and some of Ian King's stuff was probably more similar to the stuff that I had been doing, kind of on the receiving end of. So the Paul Chek was the first stuff that was that little bit different, So I kept on doing lots of different things, but that was that slightly different outlook. And then did some. I ended up doing some work. Didn't do their courses, but did some workshops with Faster, it was called, which was kind of like, I think, a Gary Gray, John Hardy, I think his name was, and it was a Gary Gray kind of influenced. You know what I'm talking about.
I've done it. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Well,
so I know that's what James had done a lot of that stuff first, and then came through that as well. So, but I didn't do their courses. I did some of their workshops, and they were at things like Filex or Fit Pro. Sorry, Filex was the Australian one. Fit Pro, and you'd see them talk, and they'd run some workshops there. So I went to a few of those, and that was interesting. And then, and always kept on doing courses. I did I flew to the States, and like internet and information was a lot more difficult to come by then. So I flew to the States to do Pavel Tatseline's RKC, so Russian Kettlebell Challenge. It's now Strong First. I went and did that that was 2005. And so that was cool, because that then kind of went back to kind of a bit more of a, it's called hard style, but like more of a hardcore kind of training, be tough. And it was kind of, more that mental aspect. So that was kind of quite.
What's the test for that? Is that the like 200 kettlebell snatches?
No. So it used to be on body weight.
Right.
And you had to do, so I think I had to do, and it may have changed, but 2005, I had to do, was it 38 snatches each hand with a 24 kilo, but you couldn't put it down. So it wasn't like the 10-minute snatch test that we had to get 200 for the Secret Service test. It wasn't that one. You had to do you had to do whatever your weight was, and I was probably like 95 kilos at the time, so it was kind of like, you had to do 37 to 38 snatches each hand. So that was their kind of pass fail. Mate, I came back and I wrote a kettlebell course after I'd been on that, because I thought, this is amazing, this is great. And so I went and put all my all the stuff that I'd kind of learnt until that point trying to explain how the kettlebells worked and why they worked. So I ran an education company for about 6 years. So that was the first start of it. It was like CPD points. So it was called what was it called? Optimal Life Fitness was the name of the company, and it was Extreme Kettlebells. So there's an Extreme Kettlebells course. There was you get whatever it was, 24 CPDs, when you had to upskill. So it was the first kind of course of its kind, that kettlebell course that had CPD points on it. So UK, so that I kind of was a combination of what I learned practically from the Pavel course, and then it was I tried to explain I put some of the postural stuff that I was talking about through Paul Check. I had some assessments in there. I had, this is the swing, this is what we're looking for, this is why. So it was kind of, it was almost like my seminal kind of, it was almost like a manifesto of everything up until cool, kind of, I knew at the time. Now I'd probably think of, I know a lot of people who enjoyed it, but I'd be like, I'd probably do things a little bit differently. It'd be interesting to see that again. But anyway, so that those two things, the Paul Check and then the Pavel thing, they were things that kind of were very quite different to what I'd done before, and they were different to each other, but enjoyed them. Really enjoyed that 3-day kind of experience. I think it was 3 days, or maybe it was a bit longer, I'm not sure. The Pavel course, you went there, and it was my first kind of exposure to kind of professional coaches, people who were trainers, and that's all they did, but not necessarily not linked to a team or not linked to anything. They were kind of, there was, on that course, there was obviously Pavel. There was Mike Marler, who's gone on to do different bits and pieces. Steve Maxwell was there. Steve Cotter was there. There was a guy called Brett Jones, Jeff Martone. So they're all kind of, and all quite successful in different fields. They worked, some of them would work as consultants to the military, etc., and worked as consultants to different sports teams. So to see that as a kind of, I've been in the industry for a few years by that stage, but it was still quite, it was really cool. It was inspiring. It was also, like any courses, and you'd both be aware of this, you learn, there's obviously good information, but seeing those guys, almost who you'd like to model yourself on, like, different kind of qualities that different coaches had, like, he's cool, I reckon he's a dick, like, I'd hate to be seen like that, or, that's wicked, I like how he's done that. You know what I mean? It was, I found that as much as the information, because, people that say, why is the swing so effective? And the answer was, it's Russian magic. And you're like, I want a bit more than that. Yeah. So, it was a fun course, but learning that I found to be a really valuable experience, as a coach, trainer, whatever we call ourselves nowadays. But, I found that was, a great experience. And then, ran courses over the next 5 years, did different workshops and stuff. Still had the studio with Joss. And then it was, 2010 was when I first did my level 1. So that's now 11 years ago. I'm waiting to get onto my level 2 at the moment. It keeps getting postponed. Obviously because of what we're in. So it was October, and now it's February, and now it's not going to be February, obviously. So I'm not sure. But I did the level 1, 2010, and that was mainly out of curiosity. Our studio, Joss's and myself's studio in Monument was effectively like, it was 1,500 square foot. We had 2 squat racks, a couple of squat stands, heap of kettlebells, barbells, a couple of pull-up bars, like attached to the wall. So it was very basic. So and we went in with that idea back, when we opened it in 2006, because that's how we train people. We didn't really use a lot of equipment or machines anyway. So and I never really had. So, a lot of like CrossFit's methodology, philosophy kind of fit into what we were doing anyway. In that it was getting people to lift their own weight, on the floor, like, lunging, body weight squats, push-ups, press-ups, whatever, ring rows, and then adding weight to that. Then, then you're using kind of weightlifting, powerlifting types of, movements, kettlebells. We had a rower. We only had one rower, one spin bike, and so it was pretty close to kind of what you needed as a CrossFit kind of box in it. So that kind of fit. And I used to see when I was running my kettlebell courses, and we also then by this stage had a weightlifting course and had a boxing course, and you'd see people with CrossFit t-shirts on, and from about kind of as early as 2005, 2006. And then and YouTube at this stage, things were still pretty much dial up on your laptop, so things were hard to watch, but you'd start seeing kind of people doing Fran, throwing flops. You're like, wow, this is wicked. And then on some of the courses you'd have CrossFit t-shirts, and you're like, oh, this seems cool, man. What is it? And then we had a lot of we're at the time, it was difficult to get on a British weightlifting course, and that's why I ended up writing a course. I couldn't weightlift to save myself, but I ended up writing a course. I put all the theoretical elements in it, and then I'd get weightlifters to come, tutor on the courses, and I'd do the lecturing part, and they do the tutoring part. But at that time, you couldn't do a weightlifting course. You could do ballers steps, and you had to be a baller trainer for a couple of years or whatever it was, and then you could become take about 3 years to become a weightlifting coach. But my argument, and the reason why I wrote the course in the first place was, we're told as PTs or exercise scientists or whatever our background is, that the Olympic lifts are really, really beneficial. But then it stops. So so what are you meant to do after that? So I figured putting a course together with a structure that would then at least give people some idea of what they're meant to do would work. So I did a weightlifting course, and then I met a few obviously CrossFitters on that course because of that, because we were one of the only places that had it. And I remember Davs Dennis, who runs Cardiff. It's not Cardiff. CrossFit in Cardiff. I think it's
Dragon?
Cardiff. No. CrossFit Cardiff or Cardiff CrossFit, whatever. Cardiff CrossFit. Let's call it that. Mate, great guy. And he came in a couple of my courses, and then he came down to, and I was always picking his brain. What's his CrossFit? What's his t-shirt you're wearing and stuff? So I met him on a couple of courses, and then he came down to. By this stage, I was running this other facility down in Lewisham where we'd run our courses out of at Hither Green. And he came down because we had a couple of parkour people come down running muscle up workshops. On this old scaffolding that we had, because we didn't put bars up, we just put a whole heap of scaffolding up. And he came for that. And I remember the weekend, there had been people on our courses who'd had CrossFit t-shirts, and there were 3 people. Dabs was one of them, who in the space of a weekend. So it was kind of like, okay, I need to learn a little bit more about it. He was talking about it. I had there's a guy, Matej Hočevar, who's from Slovenia, but who I'd met through kettlebell stuff and different things. He was out on one of our courses, and he was talking about CrossFit. His gym in Slovenia, Ljubljana, was now going to become a CrossFit gym. And the other person was Jeff Stewart, who runs Momentum at Hackney. And he was a Polican guy. Well, not Polican guy. That's, I don't want to label him, but he used to work for Ultimate Performance. So, and that was quite Polican influenced and methodology. But and he was there at our course, and he had this CrossFit t-shirt on, and he was doing our course, smashing out snatches and swings and burpees on the last day, because that's kind of what we used to do as well anyway. And I was like, dude, like this is unusual. You're a kind of a Polican dude. Like most of his information he'd be kind of writing at the time was kind of poo-pooing CrossFit, etc. I'm like, well, what's going on? He goes, mate, I love it. And those 3 guys, of course, it came from 3 different sources. I thought this is wicked. So that weekend, Davs Dennis said, call Carl Steadman and ask him some questions. And so I just called Carl Steadman, who's kind of effectively the godfather of CrossFit in the UK, gave him a call, and then mate, he's great dude. And I thought, number one, this guy's a good bloke. He said, mate, just come and do the course. You'll probably love it. Whatever. If you've got any more questions, let us know. I went and booked a course that weekend. So Josh and myself did a course, and that was 2010. So that's kind of how, it was that weekend, those 3 people that kind of all at once were kind of like pointing in that direction. Did the course. We felt a little bit like fish out of water a little bit, because we're going to the course, and everyone's already got their whatever box they're from t-shirts on, and we were there and kind of, oh, hold on, like we don't know what, didn't really know what Fran was. Like, I'd seen different exercises, but didn't know the names or didn't know the famous people in CrossFit or anything at that stage. So but loved it. Good people. There's a beer at the end, so it seemed like a great fun, and kind of bought into their whole philosophy, which wasn't that different from what we were doing anyway. So man, like, and then then we set up, Tom and myself met Tom, and we set up City Road in 2014. So there it is. So that's more specific of that kind of history and what's changed with how I've done things in the industry as well.
Yeah, I think the thing that's fascinating about any story like that is there are some things that stay constant. So things like kettlebells have stood the test of time, like powerlifting, Olympic weight lifting, those disciplines have been constants throughout that. It's just the degree to which people emphasize them. And with your kettlebell course, you're just like drilling in on an old staple and
and gymnastics, gymnastics has been there for a while, and that's where when people, people coming into CrossFit even in the last 5 years may not have seen how much it has influenced the industry, because people argue that it's just weightlifting or it's just gymnastics or it's just powerlifting. But I know myself from working in the industry, like I'd take a year out to just train triathlons, and then I'd get weak, and then I'd be like, oh well, now I want to do some powerlifting, and then I'd go and do some powerlifting, and I'd get strong again, and get heavy again, and then I'd try and go for a run, and I've done a marathon, I've had boxing fights, so it's all different. I guess in some ways CrossFit's, by combining their elements or all the elements, everyone wants to be fitter, faster, stronger. Ideally, I think at the core of it, most people would like a bit more of everything, right? Which effectively is what CrossFit is. And it took the way that they package the way their philosophy and methodology is packaged. It took that for me to realize, hold on, I can do a bit of everything, and be pretty good at most of those things, or be better than I was even when I was doing things before, because you'd often, I trained for kettlebell sport for a couple of years, and and then, what I mean? So you moved in and out of these different variables, and it's kind of like, hold on, and it hasn't been, and it wasn't until I kind of did started understanding more of CrossFit's methodology specifically, that I was able to always make sure that you're always maintaining something, that you're always keeping something in there. So, even if you are, thinking I'm going through more of a strength phase at the moment, make sure you do a little bit of cardio too, and make sure you keep your gymnastics in there. Otherwise, they won't be there when you come back. So that, I think, if nothing else, it's shown people that you can do a bit of everything. You can look a bit better, you can be healthier, you can be stronger, you can be faster, all at the same time. So I think that's cool. And also, like, a lot of what happens, gym box, which is probably one of the most in terms of functional fitness, one of the most forward, thinking of those gyms. They only had, so at Bank, their first rig only went in about 2011 or 2012. So gyms looked very, very different 10 years ago, and they still do. But gym box now, it's amazing. But they were the first people commercially to kind of, well, in the UK anyway, obviously it's different all over the world, but they were one of the first commercially to kind of do that. Gyms were very, very different, so that it's changed. People use it frustrates me a little bit when people are like, oh, no, I don't CrossFit. I do. I'm a functional fitness enthusiast or whatever it might be, right? Like, no, I do. It's like, dude, like, you need to at least know a little bit of history or pay a little bit of respect to, the terms Metcons, AMRAPs, EMOM. Metcon wasn't used. None of them, and now it's used all the time. No, I don't do CrossFit. I do some strength training and then some Metcons. It's like, dude, come on, man. Like, that's fine, but that's effectively what CrossFit program is. Do you know what I mean? Like, so that's one thing that kind of irks me a little bit, but that might just be because I'm getting old and have seen it change. That's kind of like,
I think we could talk about that all day. But one thing I want to talk about before we run out of time, your carnivore experience. I think it's something that's fascinated me for a while, and it's over a year ago, I think we were speaking about it, that you'd sort of gone into it. Tell us about
that. I think philosophically it's something I can buy into, because I do think it ticks some of my boxes, that maybe even intellectually, in that when you think about, hold on, there's essential amino acids, there's essential fatty acids, from if you're eating a carnivore diet, you're going to get those things. So you're going to effectively, you can get what you need, minimum effective dose. You have a carnivore diet, within reason, you're going to get everything that you need. So on that, on itself, it's like, okay, tick. But then from a practical perspective, you know, I did find it a little bit difficult. I think it'd be easy if I you know, and if I wasn't married and have kids, it'd be easy. But I'm mopping up food. You know, the boys yogurt and berries in the morning when they don't finish what they're having. You know, so I'll be finishing that off because I hate to waste food. So, you know, so practically, it's not, you know, it's not that viable for me. But you know, I coach people and talk to people about food all the time. And one of the main things I do is try to tell people to get their proteins and fats in anyway. You know, some of the things we've already discussed, you know, Charles Poliquin, etc. One of his big things on nutrition is, you know, earn your carbs. So, you know, the idea is if you're getting your proteins and fats in effectively, you know, which could be from carnivore or carnivore type diet, you're ticking your boxes, and the rest is just, you know, to cater for lifestyle, social, whatever it might be. And I still have that viewpoint. You know, but I'm flexible on it. I still kind of, you know, I still have some beer, still have some wine, still have some ice cream. And then, you know, like as I said, with the boys for dinner, you know, we make sure that, you know, let's say we're having spaghetti bolognese or like a you know, a chili kind of rice thing or whatever. You know, I'll have bits of the rice or bits of the pasta with them. You know, I don't want it to be that they're thinking either, why aren't you having that, or why aren't you having that? You know, trying to encourage with them at least a balanced idea, and that hopefully is, because, you know, some of the things that kids eat nowadays, and you know, as you guys would be aware, the perspective of like a healthy diet is just crazy. So, you know, there's that kind of, I guess leadership. Setting with your kids. I'm making sure that, you know, we're having our good proteins, good fats, and then, you know, whatever else goes with that. You know, your fruits and vegetables to kind of tap into that. So, but you know, I'm not that big on vegetables. Mate, I don't mind them, but, you know, like I make a roast every week and roast up a lot of veggies for that. So, you know, and that kind of pick up whatever's left of those for the rest of the week. So, but yeah.
Do you feel many changes when you switch to a more meat-heavy diet compared to what you were previously doing, or was it?
No, I felt fine, but I guess that's been a gradual transition anyway. Like, you know, if I go back to the 90s when I thought I was going to have a rugby league career, disillusioned as I was, but, you know, I was, you know, I played in the forwards. It's rugby league, so I know a lot of people understand rugby union because I'm not that big, but I played prop, you know, and I played a lot of prop in rugby league, and, you know, most I got up to was 95, 96 kilos, and that was hard work for me to with the running around to be that weight, you know. I used to have to eat a lot, and that used to be, you know, lots of oats, lots of kind of, you know, whatever else with your kind of meat and vegetables, lots of, you know, whatever, a lot of bread, just trying to smash as much down, particularly while you're doing all that running around. You know, it took a long while to get out of that habit, you know, or even it was some kind of even subconscious thing that, you know, if my body weight was under 90 kilos, that was a problem to me, you know. Like I was trying to push 100, and even now, if I get on the scales and I'm kind of 89 kilos or 88 kilos, I'm kind of like, whoa, you know, dude, I'm a bit sad, you know.
Wasting away, yeah.
That's still there. That's still in my head. So, but I did, when I let go of that, that made it easier. So, you know, eating kind of, I've been through different phases where I guess I'd been paleo at different times. I'd kind of, you know, tried different things and messed about, you know, low carb when things were just called low carb, and keto and whatever. And it kind of played around with things for a long time, you know, for 15 years. And a lot of it is kind of the same, because my base is still getting, you know, my protein fats in, and then the other stuff is what you make up. So I always look at, you know, when I'm having some food, is like, what's the protein, you know, like, but that's even now, that's so unconscious that you know, I don't think of it, you know what I mean? So if you're out at a restaurant, like I might have, I don't know, steak and spinach, you know, with a side of chips, but that's kind of, that's what I'll be going for first. But that's now completely, it's not even, that's an unconscious decision now. It's not even subconscious. It's on that next level. Like I don't even, you know what I mean? So, you know, and you probably be similar. You're making those choices without, they're not even choices, you know?
That's it.
So no, if I drop the carbs out for a while, I don't necessarily notice too many changes. A lot of time I end up feeling better. When I first made a couple of the first big shifts, and then also I did play around with a little bit of intermittent fasting, and I guess I could almost say that, or time factored eating, or however you want to term it. And I guess I'm kind of still doing a little bit of that, and that was a good change, because I used to, and that was based on historically trying to be 100 kilos or 100 kilos plus, right? I used to wake up and I'd be putting food in my face straight away. And in our jobs, we're up at kind of 5 and going to be starting at 6 or 6:30. So I'd be smashing food in then, and I never felt well on that. And I'd also be trying to get food in just before I went to bed, and I didn't feel good on that either. So when I first started kind of time factored eating, or taking those two, that first meal, that last meal out, or not even meals, feeds or whatever you're doing, that was amazing. And then also playing around with what I had then, if it was just some kind of some protein, some eggs, etc., that was also, I felt a lot better for that. So there are changes, but they've kind of been implemented over a long period of time. So now they're just kind of habits, and they're just what I do,
Yeah, I think I've had very similar experiences, and it's almost when you go to sort of extremes and then you dial it back to actually what you actually need. So with a lot of people went super high protein at some point in their life, then you sort of build an awareness of what protein is and how much protein you want in a given meal. You sort of then dial it back, and like you say, it becomes subconscious. Like when you're thinking about making a meal or ordering a meal anywhere out, that decision is already made for you, and it's steered by all the experience that you've had from going too far and then also not far enough.
Well, there were times you would have had this too, like if all protein, like you get those meat sweats,
Yeah, exactly.
So that's but I don't have meat sweats. I'm hardly full anymore. I used to remember most of my life, particularly kind of like late teens and 20s when I was trying to eat, I always had indigestion. I just thought that was a thing. I just thought, maybe I've got some kind of thing. It had no connection that it's because you're putting so much in your mouth all the time that your body's not wanting it there. On a very basic level. But it took a long time. It even took a long time. It wasn't that long ago. It must have been probably still 10 to maybe 7 to 10 years ago that I remember still trying to think, okay, look, I'm doing a lot of training at the moment. Before I jump on my bike, or before I get on the bus, before I get to work for 6 or 6:30, let's have a shake, because I need those calories, dude. Like, I'm so much better without those calories. Not to say that if I was an Olympian, or if I was still playing, thinking that I was, trying to maintain 105 kilos or something as a professional sports person, that might be different. That might be what you have to do that. But for me, that was totally unnecessary. And it only took, as I said, like 20 years after it was necessary, I then was able to stop those things. So it's funny how habits work.
It is funny. One more question, just to be respectful of your time. We'll wrap it up soon. Tell us about the cold pond dipping that you have been doing. How did it start? What were you looking to get out of it? And let's go there.
Oh, how did it start? Well, again, just from the last years being in the fitness industry, kind of over a long period of time, different things have done their rounds. Mate, I did some training and interviewed this Russian strongman who worked with the Moscow State Circus, and this is back in about 2005, 2006. And I remember back then he was talking about how every morning he'd get a bucket of water, cold water, throw it over his head, and kind of put some, I think he'd chew some garlic and whatever else, and then he'd go for a 30-minute run. That's how he'd start. Then he'd come back and have his breakfast, do all of his training, and then I thought, whatever. So I started trying to have some cold showers way back then, and messed about with cold showers. I remember, you guys would be aware of this too. Like, you'd have ice baths, garbage cans, like roller bins at kind of footy, and you jump in those full of ice, and after a game for a couple of minutes or whatever it was, So, I understood kind of a bit about cold therapy and whatnot. But then, Tom and myself went to a, I forget the name of the guy.
Oh, Wim Hof, was it?
No. But it was basically like someone had affected, maybe not, but someone had been on that experience and kind of just, done a similar thing. Tony Riddle. And it was maybe, probably November the year before last. And and as I said, played around with it anyway. But that went to his day, and it was a cool day, And part of it was went into the little paddle pool that was full of ice with kind of 5 or 6 other people, and there was like 100 people on the course or the workshop. So that was cool. And I thought, you know what, like let's do this. So Tom and myself went up to Hampstead Ponds, and I've known different people from being in gyms, some old blokes for years, whether it be back home in Australia, go do beach swims and the kind of rock pool swims right throughout the year, even in kind of June, July in Australia, where it's only kind of, it doesn't get as cold as here, but it might be 10 or 12 degrees, which is still cold. And people who did it here. So Tom and myself took ourselves just over a year ago, between Christmas and New Year's, just over a year ago, to Hampstead Ponds, to Highgate Ponds, and did some dipping. Yeah, man, I like it. Look, and you can read about all the benefits, and the benefits. I think we may have even discussed this before. There's physiological benefits. Vasoconstriction and then the blood flow, increased circulation after it, etc. The cold's meant to have a hormonal effect and response. It's also meant to do good things for your nervous system. Part of it though is it's experiential. Like you're there, you're at the ponds. It's wicked there. It's pretty magical. You're seeing all these. It's a habit. I do. I try to do it once a week. Obviously, for the last year, I did kind of 10 weeks or 12 weeks pretty much in a row until we went into that first lockdown. So, but it's part of it's definitely an experience. There's all these old boys, they all know each other. They're all fit and healthy. Some of them are in their 80s, they're still diving in, it's a challenge. It's one of those things that, you're overcoming that little bit of apprehension. Like, you get a little bit nervous before you go up there. When it's, the last one I did was 4.5 degrees and that was cold. That was the coldest I've done. Like, this time last year wasn't that cold.
Yeah.
It's closed at the moment again, but one that I did just before or just after New Year's, I think it was the Saturday. So the 2nd of January, I think it was open, or was it the one before? I can't remember. Anyway, it was 4.5 degrees, and outside was kind of, -1. So that was the coldest I've been. When I went this time a year ago, the ponds didn't get below kind of maybe 5 or 6. It was regularly kind of 6. It was a bit milder last year. So gutted that we went into lockdown, obviously for lots of reasons, but one of the reasons is because the ponds closed, man. Because that week, the last month, there were, some days haven't. There's been weeks that didn't get over 4 degrees, so the temperature was outside air temperature was like -2 to 4.
Yeah.
So the ponds that next week would have had to have dropped. It's a fairly small body of water that would have been, I don't know, 2. I read a book. A guy had a diary, Al Alvarez, and his book's called he's passed away now, but called Pond Life. I think it's Pond Life. And he talks about and when he was going, they used to crack the ice, like not individually, but the attendants would, crack the ice so that there's a bit that you can kind of still go on. So I don't know if that still happens or whether they close it now. I don't know. That was the book's from 20 years ago, I think. So I was kind of looking forward to that because it is. It's a bit of a ritual. It's a bit of a routine. Like, I was in the habit of doing it. I do it 7:30 on a Sunday morning. And it was, you're alive. It's one of those things like, like anything, there's that little bit of kind of nervous. You're going in, you've got to breathe to accommodate it. You try, I stay for about, 4 to 5 minutes, stick my head under, swim around a little bit. Some of the old boys still dive in, man. They just, no messing, boom. I was diving in until November when we went into that lockdown, and then the ponds closed, and that was really cool because from September to when they closed, each week was a little bit different. I'd been in August, and it was 22 degrees, right? So I kind of stopped a month because it's obviously not, it's not cold exposure then, is it? So it's just different. It's nice, like it's lovely going for a swim, but it's not the same experience. Then I went back in the end of September, and each week it was wicked because that first time I dived in September, it was 16 degrees, and going from 22, 23 to 16, that's massive. That was probably one of the hardest. Just the shock. It is a shock. You're not prepared for that change. But then every week that I went was about a degree colder until it closed in November, and then it got down to 10, but then it closed, and so then the next time I went in December, it was 6. And so that again, I didn't dive in then. I saw the board. I'm a bit gutted because I saw the board. It was 6. I'm like, nah, I'm gonna use the ladder. So I was a bit disappointed. But it's like a weekly reset for me, or it had been a weekly reset. Do it. You're kind of overcoming that. You're out in nature. You get in the cold. It's not a swim. Like even they've brought the ropes in now. So I go in the ladder, dip my head. and then kind of go around, and the ropes get brought in as it gets colder. So, it takes 3 minutes of very kind of slow, kind of breaststroke, because you can't move that fast because your muscles are kind of,
Yeah.
mind you, the last time I went, when it was 4.5, I did crawl. So I was I'm not hanging about. Like I was probably only in there. I did the lapping kind of probably record time. I was like, man, I'm getting out. There's 2 guys who I'd meet there who do it as well. And they were like, yeah, dude, like normally we have a chat on the way around. I was like, nah, it's too cold. Like I was in and out. So but yeah, man, it's good. You need to make it, mate.
I will do, mate. When we're allowed back, I'm keen to go try it out. One of my mates has got a swimming pool, and he's been going every day in his pool this year. So he'll put up a little story, and it's like 2-3 degrees. It's very impressive.
Carl Steadman, I don't know if you guys follow him, but he lives in Scotland, and he's built a plunge pool, and it's often got ice on it. And he, after every training session, he just goes out outside of where he set up a little gym in his garage in the Highlands, and kind of just plunges, man. And it's like, they have cracked ice, and that's been it's been 2 and 1 for a couple of months now. So that's serious. That's the goal. I'd love to be able to have have one at home. Sitting in an ice bath, I've done that a couple of times. It is fine, but it's a bit dull sitting in your bathroom in a tub. It's not the same. As I said, for me, it's the whole process. It's the experience, not just the cold exposure itself.
Yeah, exactly. Get the nature.
Somewhere nice, man. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're over time, mate, so I don't want to take up any more of your day. Thank you very much for coming on. We really appreciate the time and the insight with all your experience and wisdom.
A lot of waffling, but there you go.
It's all good stuff. It's a great story. And thanks very much for your time, mate. And we hope to see you and Basis kicking off in the not too distant future.
Yeah, can't wait. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, pal.
Bye-bye.
Speak soon.